we are again. And thank you so much, CK, for hosting me on your channel. And I really take this as a privilege to be the one to do the rapid fire with you. So, for everybody who's watching, this is From Insight to Impact, coaching modern leaders. And the reason why I do that is for the last 7, 8 months, CK has been coaching me. And for me, after achieving 30,000 plus hours of mentoring, working with entrepreneurs from across the world, I had reached a point where I thought that I did not need coaching. But frankly, it was all absolutely otherwise, right? It was absolutely needed. And hence, let's jump into it. So, CK, are you ready for it?
Yeah, very much.
For the past 7 months, you've been asking me questions all through this journey of coaching. And those questions have really made me think, rethink, and work about it. And for all of them who are watching us, I have to say this, that the person who started this coaching is to the person who I am today. It's a massive change and difference. So let's talk, let's ask, and it's always fun to go with this. So the opening thought is this, right? That even leaders need a safe space to unravel, to rebuild, or to reflect. And that's why my first question to CK is, why leaders need coaching?
Why leaders need coaching? I think that's a question a lot of leaders also them keep asking. Like I'm sure even 7, 8 months back, you would never have felt the need for coaching, right? Because you've been there, done that, you've achieved so much in life, you've been successful. So the fact is, you would always felt, why do I need coaching? Right? And that's a very standard question that's in the mind of most people. In many corporate organizations, leaders do see other leaders being coached, right? And sometimes wonder, is it therefore, do I really need it? Do I not need it? So I think a lot of people don't really understand what goes into coaching, right? What goes into coaching and how deep it is, right? So why leaders need coaching is that everybody is fighting their own battle. Everybody is in their own, little zone that they are working with, irrespective of the level. They could be at vice president level or senior vice president level, or they could be the MD or CEO of an entrepreneur firm or a business or a family business. Quite often at that level, it's quite lonely, quite lonely. And the only people that you're really interacting with is your immediate manager and manager's manager, your immediate team, and your stakeholders. So a lot of stakeholders that you deal with. So that's the world. That's the world. And quite often, everyone gets caught up in the day-to-day operations, the day-to-day firefighting, the day-to-day crisis management, that they hardly have time to sit back and reflect on what am I doing right and what may I not be doing so right, right? What are the things which are helping me? What are the things which are holding me back, right? What's pulling me back from achieving what I really want to achieve? Or I think in many cases, am I even clear what I really want to achieve, right? So I think this is where I think coaching really comes in. Coaching really comes in because certainly the coach is a totally external person, unbiased, right? Does not often know the inside story of the organization or the person, right? And so it's like a fresh start for the person going through the coaching. That look, I have somebody here who will listen to me, will ask me difficult questions, will make me think, will make me reflect. And maybe from that, I would get much more clarity on what really matters. I think that really is my answer to that question.
Bang on and totally right. And as I say, right, that day I remember that you were, I was to meet you on a different business conversation, and I reached early to the venue, and your coaching was going on, and I was just waiting for the meeting to get over, and I saw your coachee walk away from you after the session. And I'm a people's person. I read people, and the kind of expression that he had, the clarity in his head, the smile on his face, for a minute I was like, I need to be in that space, right? And I remember, though the agenda for the meeting was on a business collaboration, I walked into that meeting and I said, can you coach me? It was a very random thought, but came out of the reflection of that leader who walked away from your meetings. So I think it's not about fixing, it's about refining that what happens to coach when you coach leaders. My next question, what coaching is and isn't, and this is so important, CK, because very often, coaching is so misunderstood, and especially if they are these modern leaders, are leaders who have achieved something. For them, coaching is something kind of a training. So what is coaching and what is it not?
The coaching is not training. Coaching is not mentoring. Coaching is not therapy. Right? Coaching is coaching. Right? And the role of the coach is to help the individual reflect, like I mentioned earlier, reflect on what's working well for them, what's not working well for them, what are the things that they're really aspiring to do or reach in the next 1 or 2 years, right? Both professionally and personally, right? And also, do they really know what are the perceptions others are carrying about them? First part is what they feel about themselves in terms of their strengths and areas of development. And secondly, what others who they deal with on a regular basis, both professionally and personally, how do they see them? What are their perceptions? So quite often people are, not aware of the perceptions which they are creating, right or wrong, good or bad. Right? So I think the coaching is very much a reflective journey, right? Unlike mentoring, where the mentor is a subject matter expert, so can give very clear instructions or guidance there. Okay, you're getting stuck on this, try it this way, do it this way, right? A mentor is very knowledge sharing based, right? It's more giving a solution to a problem, right? Whereas a coach may know the answer to the problem, but will not give the answer. The coach will keep asking questions till the person reflects and finds the answer themselves and owns the answer themselves and say, look, this is now I'm realizing where I was getting stuck. Now I know where, I've been held back and I'm aware of it now and I'm seeing the feedback of others, right? They are seeing a lot more strengths in me than I see in myself, right? You as a coach are seeing more strengths in me than I'm seeing in myself, right? And I think I need to accept those strengths. I need to acknowledge those strengths and do something about it. And in the same context, I also need to acknowledge that I'm not perfect. There are areas in me which are coming out very clearly from my own reflections, my own wheel of life exercise, and even the feedbacks that I've got from many of my stakeholders, which is normally part of the coaching process. I think now I've got a full picture of myself as seen by me and as seen by others, right? And as a coach, then one is able to help go through that mass of information and sift it down to say that, look, which seem to be the most important inputs that are coming out here, both professionally and personally. And I think that's a very important part of the coaching, right? First, gathering all the information. Second one is processing that information. And third is filtering that information down to two, maybe 2 or 3 max professional goals and 1 or 2 or 3 personal goals, which the person being coached really believes that, look, now, yeah, these are the things that really I need to be focusing on for the next 12 months at least, right? So I think the coaching is all about not giving the answer, asking the right questions, being patient, uh, being a good listener, talking very little, listening more, right? And letting the other person talk and reflect and come up with the answers more than anything else. So I think that's the broad definition of what coaching is and what coaching is not, right? Like I said, mentor would potentially give a solution, right? A therapist is something where a person really has a deep problem, right? Not something which maybe a mentor or a coach can solve, right? So that needs a therapist. So I think there's a role for everything in a person's life, right? It's quite possible that a person needs a mentor at some stage, needs a coach at some stage, may need a therapist at some stage. But there are 3 different functions, there are 3 different styles, right? And coaching is something which is very reflective and making the other person think about what could I have done differently. A good example I always talk about to my coaches is that, why do the top cricket players need a coach? Why do the top tennis players, why do the top sports people who are really subject experts in their domain, right? Why do they need a coach? A coach is not going to tell them how to run or how to play cricket or how to play football, right? Coach is only observing from a distance what they're doing well and where they're slipping up, right? Uh, and then having a heart-to-heart, candid conversation with the player, saying that, look, have you thought about why this is happening repeatedly? Why are you missing out on, scoring runs or getting wickets or scoring goals? Is there something that you think is that you could fine tune, right? So you're talking to somebody who's already an expert in their field, but you're making them reflect on what they might not be doing so well.
Absolutely.
And the answer will come from them only because they know the answer, because they are the expert, right? The role of the coach is not to give the answer, even though they may know the answer. I think that's the fundamental aspect of coaching. It is very reflective.
Absolutely. In fact, exactly 3 sessions after, I had identified so much of clutter. And I remember asking you, what do I do? And you just said one thing. You said, I enable decision making, but not give answers. That's your job, right? And I think that made a impact until date. It all comes down to that. You enable the right decision making through the questions that you ask. So, quickly to the last one, and very important, whatever long the video becomes, this is very critical for the viewers because this is what really helped me identify the need of coaching with you, and which has turned out to be my life's best decision I ever took, right? What are the three issues you see the present day leaders face, which definitely is a sign that they should start looking out for the professional help for their improvement? What are those three issues or signs?
I think I'd like to answer this in two parts. I think, if you're talking about a corporate leader, most of the corporate leaders who have been coaching have been in their, mid 30s to mid 40s, which means they are approaching the peak of their career, right? They're either at a vice president level or a senior vice president level or a director or a senior director, that kind of a level, typically, right? Which means they've worked their way up. They've worked their way up. Obviously, they're subject matter experts, and they've handled teams. They've grown in the company, or they've grown in the industry, or changed industries. They've adapted. So one has to start off with the assumption that a person has reached that level because they have a lot of competencies, right? And the organization also has put them in that level because they have the competencies. But quite often, as they keep changing roles, many of these corporate leaders keep changing roles every 2 years. They may be in the same organization, but handling different roles, different teams. And each time there's a change of a role or a change of a company, right? The whole context changes, right? And so adaptability becomes a very critical skill. Somebody may have done a very good job in one company, one role. They move to the next company or next role and they struggle because the context is different, the environment is different, the culture is different, and they're not able to adapt fast enough. So quite often, this adaptability part is an area which gets taken up in coaching. How do they adapt their leadership behaviors? How do they adapt their leadership styles to fit into the context in which they are today? What worked for them 5 years ago may not work for them today. And what's working for them today may not work for them 5 years later, right? So the need for that leader to be adaptable, I think, is something comes up quite often, right? So when I say adaptability, it could be more about their leadership behaviors. It could be more about their leadership styles, right? It could be the way they, deal with their stakeholders. Right? It is the way they carry themselves, carry the perception that they create in that organization about themselves. In fact, I have a separate video on this. I talk about 3 critical success factors, right? And I talk about situational leadership, which is in terms of how do you adjust your leadership style depending on the situation. I talk about executive presence, saying that how do you carry yourself and create the right perception. And I talk about, the need to manage stakeholders well, because every time you change your role or you go to the next level, your stakeholders change.
Correct.
And it means how do you manage those stakeholders? How do you create the right perceptions? And how do you get the work done with those stakeholders? So, in a corporate context, many of the coaching goals typically are around stakeholder management or around building executive presence or around building leadership style or around, the way they manage their teams and the way they manage their time, right?
Correct.
So some of them could be professional goals, some of them could be personal goals. Focus enough time to take care of their work, their wellness, their health, their other priorities in life, so that there's a more holistic approach to how they manage and grow as leaders. So that's in a corporate context where somebody is fitting into a larger organization context, right? Since I coach a lot of individuals like you, as well as a lot of uh, business owners, right, who are running an entrepreneurship, could be a family business, could be a large entrepreneurship with a couple of hundred employees, right? There, the challenge is different because the owner is the one and all,
Mhm.
right? So they become the decision maker for every small decision. They become the bottleneck for every small decision. And, you know, they are really not reporting to anybody, right? The buck starts with them and stops with them. So they have a very different set of challenges. They're not fitting into an environment. They are creating the environment, right? So there, the leadership style becomes a big thing in terms of how they manage their teams, how do they delegate to their teams, how do they trust their team members, how do they grow their team members, how do they create a right culture, right? So the coaching goals for entrepreneurs tend to be very different than the coaching goals for a corporate leader,
Mhm.
because the context is different, although they're both individuals I'm dealing with, right? So I think that's the last. These are the broad things that typically come up in coaching as areas where these leaders need to develop, despite being leaders for a long time, despite having grown up the ranks, or despite being subject matter experts, right? It's all about becoming more aware of what's holding them back and fine tuning that whole process. The coaching is all about fine tuning. It's not about dramatically changing someone. Yeah.
Correct. Perfect. With that, thank you so very much for this conversation because I know it would help a lot of people. My final thought on this is a leader who invests in coaching is investing in the future of their organization because this is what happened to me. This is what has happened to so many of your coaches that you've spent time with. So I hope that mostly all these people who feel that they are kind of shrinking in their own growth, I think it's time to just have a recheck on that. So thank you
Yeah, I
so
have
very
only one last thing to add to what you said. I think see, when I'm coaching an individual, it's
much.
not about impact to that individual only,
Yeah, yep,
right? Because some of the individuals I've coached are managing teams of a couple of thousand people,
correct.
which means they got 10, 12 people directly reporting to them. They have another 10, 12 people reporting to their direct reports. Or if it's an entrepreneur, they're managing 200, 300 employees and responsible for those employees and their families and everything else, right? So the key thing is when I'm coaching an individual, it's about how is it helping that individual? How is it helping the team? How is it helping the organization? So this is something I make them define at the start of the coaching. That if you work on these coaching goals, how will it help you? How will it help your team? How will it help your organization? And at the end of the coaching, I ask them, so how do you think it has helped you? How do you think it's helped your team? How it's helped your organization? So it may be coaching one individual, but you're touching a lot of other people through that person. You're just
Uh,
reinforcing your point. Yeah, just reinforcing.
Absolutely. Just last week, I was mentoring my agri-tech startup from Erode, and I was just telling him a few things in regards to what was doing, and it was with their team. And I realized that very minute that how many indirect lives you've been touching by just coaching me, right? And the same applies to so many. So thank you once again, CK. It's been my
Thank you.
always a pleasure to have a chat with you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Yeah.